On the 100th day, the tower was silent save for the wind. Naoki stood alone, his spear planted in a mound of demon skulls, for as far as the eye could see, the plain was a graveyard of demons. Thousands upon thousands, their twisted forms frozen in death. Then a horn broke the silence, Imperial cavalry on the horizon. Reinforcements who had no idea the tower was even under attack.
The report said this post was abandoned. There shouldn't be anyone alive. You held this tower alone?
Naoki's boots rested on a pile of horned skulls. The 100 days had carved him into something no longer entirely human.
So, someone finally came.
But the scout couldn't know, that this soldier had lit the beacon every single night. And every single night, someone had turned away. He was found, but the real battle was only beginning. 100 days, one soldier, and a betrayal that would shake the Empire.
Just right that the demon attack wiped out the supplies. A small lie to cover a small loss.
I won't falsify a report. Soldiers died in that attack. Their families deserve the truth.
Then you'll be reassigned. There's a watchtower on the Kale border, completely dead. Report there at dawn, alone.
The remote watchtower had been empty for years. Naoki arrived to find crumbling stone and a single rusty beacon.
6 months of this. Then I can go home. Just follow protocol.
On his first night, he climbed the tower and lit the beacon, an old soldier's ritual, a signal to the Empire that the border was watched. The fire roared into the dark, carrying its simple message: the tower still stands.
So the stubborn fool actually lit it. Let him. No one will see that beacon. And if they do, I'll say it was a malfunction.
On his desk, the beacon report from the tower was already buried under a pile of unread documents. Naoki stood alone atop the tower, watching the flames climb. He had no idea that the only man who could send help had already turned his back. The next morning, a shape moved in the mist at the tower's base. Naoki's hand tightened on his spear.
Demon? On the dead border? Impossible.
He killed the scout, but its dying shriek carried across the plain. An answer came, a low rumble. Then dozens of shapes emerging from the haze. The first wave crashed against the tower. He fought through the morning, blood soaking the stone.
They're not just wandering. They're heading for the tower. This is an attack.
When the last demon fell, Naoki dragged himself to the beacon and set it ablaze, praying it would be seen. Inside the tower, he tore cloth for bandages, his hands shaking. He carved the first mark into the wall. Dawn on the second day showed more demon tracks in the mud. He was not alone.
Day 1. How many more?
The siege had begun, and the beacon burned unanswered. The attacks came every night after that. Naoki learned to read the demons' rhythms, turning the tower's narrow stairs into a killing ground.
They always come from the east. If I funnel them into the tower, I can control how many face me at once.
He began to hoard the beacon oil, lighting it only when he saw the largest hordes massing, a calculated risk. In the capital, a junior officer brought a report to Captain Renji. The watchtower's beacon was burning. Renji barely looked up.
A malfunction. That tower hasn't been manned in years. File it with the other anomalies.
Each morning, Naoki carved another tally into the stone. The wall grew crowded with slashes.
Day 8. Still no patrols. They should have seen the smoke by now.
The demons never stopped. They threw themselves against the tower with a persistence that felt like more than instinct.
Maybe the beacon is broken. Maybe no one can see it. Or maybe they just don't care.
10 days, 10 tallies, 10 unanswered fires. He was starting to understand. This wasn't an oversight. Day 11. A wave of demons blotted the plain, larger, armored, led by a hulking commander with a serrated blade.
He's not a pack leader. He's a soldier.
The commander's blade cut deep across Naoki's ribs. He forced the beast back and drove his spear through its throat.
In subordination, they called it Now I am bleeding for an empire that abandoned me.
When the horde broke, Naoki slumped among the dead. Something gleamed at the commander's belt, a leather pouch. Inside, a folded parchment, edges charred, bearing the wax seal of a coiled dragon, the emblem of Kale.
Kale. They don't consort with demons. Why is their seal on orders for a demon commander?
The script was foreign, unreadable, but the message was clear. This siege was no random attack. Someone had orchestrated it.
If the Empire won't come, I'll deliver this evidence myself, even if it takes 100 days.
He pressed the parchment against his wound, beneath the bandages. A secret heavier than his spear. By day 21, his rations were gone. He cracked demon bones for marrow, tore cloth from the dead for bandages.
I am becoming a ghoul, eating the enemy just to keep fighting.
From the tower, he could see the demon camp now. Tents and cookfires, a siege meant to last months.
They're not leaving. Neither am I.
He spent a day trying to repair the beacon with scavenged gears and wire. The flame sputtered, weaker than ever.
Useless. It won't reach anyone. Even if it does, no one's watching, unless someone is watching and choosing to look away.
His hand pressed against the tower's imperial eagle, the symbol of the nation that had chained him here.
If they abandon me, they'll answer for it. But first, I survive.
21 days. The tally marks crowded toward the floor. He tightened his grip on the spear and faced the next dawn. On the 31st day, a storm swallowed the plain. Rain hammered the tower, and the beacon drowned in its iron cradle.
No light, no signal. They'll come for sure now.
They did. The tower door splintered inward, and demons poured through like floodwater. The fight was blind and brutal. Spear thrusts in the dark, bodies tumbling down stone stairs.
Not here. Not like this. Not without making them pay.
When the last demon fell, Naoki collapsed against the wall, blood pooling beneath him. He woke to his own reflection in a shattered mirror. The man staring back was hollowed out, hardly human.
Yuki. Mia. I am sorry.
In the glass, he saw them. His sister's smile, his mother's hand reaching out, a memory that hurt more than any wound. He pushed himself upright, gripping the spear. Not for the Empire, for the ones already taken. He trapped a young demon scout and dragged it into the tower. Fear flickered in its eyes. Fear of him through crude pictures and broken words. Naoki pried out the truth. A human from Kale had hired the tribe to attack the border. This was no mindless horde. It was a paid army. And the tower was their objective.
They were sent by a human. The parchment wasn't just orders, it was a contract.
The demon confessed more. Someone in the Empire was paid to ensure no help came. The beacon was silenced on purpose.
So it wasn't a malfunction. Someone is actively burying my signals. Who?
His mind raced to the captain who had exiled him, but he had no proof. Only a suspicion that cut deeper than any claw.
I'll find out. I'll live long enough to drag the truth into the light.
He couldn't keep the demon alive. With a single thrust, he ended it and added its skull to the pile. 2 enemies now, the horde outside and a traitor inside. He would face both. On day 51, fever took him. The wound from the demon commander festered, and his thoughts blurred like smoke. In the haze, he saw them again. Yuki, Mia, standing at the tower door, calling him to rest.
I can't. Not yet. There's still something I have to do.
But the fever pushed him. His mother's hand reached out, so gentle. It would be so easy to take it. His eyes snapped open. Alone in the dark, he clutched the Kalian parchment against his chest.
Not yet. I'll rest when the traitor in the capital hangs from the gallows.
He dragged himself to the tower's defenses and set traps, a ballista aimed at the door, stones balanced to fall. With the last of his strength, he carved words into the stone. Naoki held this tower. The beacon was ignored. Seek justice. He tied the parchment to a dead bird and threw it from the tower. A hopeless gesture, but one that might outlast him. Day 60. His body was a wreckage, but his will was a sharpened blade. Day 61. The sky bled crimson as the largest horde yet crested the horizon, bearing the Kalian war banner.
This is it. The final push. The general himself.
He cranked the ballista, aiming at the demon general who led the charge.
Come closer. Just a little more.
The bolt struck, but the horde still crashed against the tower. His traps triggered, stones fell, oil flared, yet they kept climbing.
Day 63. No rest, no food. I am bleeding from a dozen new wounds.
For 15 days he fought without pause, his spear notched, his arms leaden. The horizon never showed a single dust cloud.
They're not coming. I am dying here. But I'll take as many with me as I can.
On day 75, his legs gave out. Demons scaled the walls as he collapsed on the rampart. The sun set on a ghost who still gripped his spear. Day 76. He found a hollow stone behind the ballista. Inside, dried rations and water, a forgotten garrison's last gift.
Enough to stand. Enough to make the traitors pay.
He turned the tower into a slaughterhouse. Demons that breached the door found only darkness and a spear waiting.
Come. I have 100 days of rage to spend.
On day 99, he sealed the Kalian parchment and his carved accusations inside a waterproof pouch and bound it to his chest. Day 100. The last demon commander lunged, and Naoki drove his spear through its chest, the shaft splintering in his hands.
This is it. No more strength. No more days.
And then, through the smoke and the silence, a horn. Distant, but rising, he turned to the horizon. Dust from 1,000 hooves. The Empire had finally come. 100 days, one soldier. And now, the world would learn what he had uncovered. Scout Taro helped the bloodied soldier onto a horse. Naoki's legs barely held, but his voice was iron.
No medic. Get me the commanding officer. There's no time to waste.
The commander approached, and Naoki pulled the waterproof pouch from his chest.
This seal belongs to Kale. They hired the demons, and this, a confession. Someone inside the Empire was paid to ignore my beacons.
Murmurs rippled through the ranks. The rescued soldier wasn't just a survivor. He was a witness to treason. In the capital, a frantic messenger burst into Captain Renji's office. Captain, the tower soldier, Naoki, is alive. He's returning with accusations of treason. Renji's hand froze above his wine glass. The color drained from his face.
That stubborn fool survived? He'll ruin everything.
He stood suddenly, knocking the glass to the floor. The conspiracy was cracking. Naoki was coming. And he carried 100 days of proof. The gates of the capital opened to a hero's welcome. Crowds threw flowers and chanted his name. But Naoki's eyes were not on the petals. They swept the rooftops, the windows, searching for one face. He was brought before the emperor, who offered him any reward: gold, lands, even a general's baton.
I want nothing for myself. I ask only for a public tribunal for the officer who ignored my beacons, Captain Renji.
The court fell silent. A hero asking not for glory, but for accountability. The emperor granted his request. That same afternoon, Imperial guards stormed Captain Renji's office. The same cold smirk that had dismissed Naoki was now wiped from his face. He was dragged to the tribunal in chains. The stage was set. In the public eye, no one could bury this betrayal. Naoki would finally face the man who had left him to die, and the truth would spill like blood. The tribunal opened. Naoki stepped forward, voice steady as he recounted every beacon lit, every wound taken. Every night, the silence answered. He produced the Kalian parchment and the demon commander's blood-stained journal. Entries listed payments to an unnamed imperial officer.
This journal records the bribes. Every night, the same officer's signature. But the name is burned out. I brought a witness who can speak it.
Guards carried in a cage. The demon inside flinched under the light of the Truth Seeker's stone, bound by the artifact's power. The demon rasped a single name, Renji.
This is a lie. A demon's word means nothing.
But the stone did not flicker. The truth could not be denied.
You ignored 100 beacons. You left me to die so a foreign army could march through. Tell them who paid you.
Renji's eyes darted. He was cornered, drowning in the silence of a crowd that now saw him as what he was. The judges leaned forward. The real question hung in the air. Who gave the order?
It wasn't my idea. I was just following orders. His orders.
General Katsu, who had been seated among the observers, rose suddenly. His mask of command cracked into something feral.
General Katsu, he's the one. He was paid by Kale to let the demons through.
Katsu lunged for the exit, but guards collared him before he reached the door.
The general, the one who oversaw the entire border. This was a state conspiracy.
They dragged the general before the Truth Seeker's stone. His medals were stripped, his authority nothing.
What was your price, General? How much did Kale pay you to let demons slaughter my family?
His hand trembled as it touched the stone. The artifact flared, demanding the truth.
Kale promised to make me warlord of the borderlands once the Empire fractured. I fed them beacon schedules, troop placements, everything.
The treason that had left Naoki alone for 100 days was finally laid bare. Not the act of a lazy captain, but the cold calculation of a general who sold the border for power. Katsu's confession laid bare the entire conspiracy, the tower as breach point, the demon army poised to invade, his own power grab. All of it broken by one soldier who refused to die.
How? You were nothing. A B-rank soldier on punishment duty.
The judge's passed sentence. Katsu, stripped of rank and honor, was condemned to execution for high treason. Captain Renji's weeping echoed as his own death sentence fell. The smirk that had doomed Naoki was gone forever. The gavel struck for the final time. The court erupted in noise, but Naoki heard only silence. As the celebration swelled, he stood motionless, the waterproof pouch still clutched in his scarred hand. He walked out into the white daylight. A roar went up from the crowd. Their hero, but his face was stone.
100 days of hell, and I feel nothing.
He had won. The guilty were condemned, and the Empire glorified his name. But the siege had carved a pit in his chest no verdict could fill. The Empire had its hero. The man who held the tower walked alone. When the Emperor summoned him to receive his reward, the court glittered with gold and titles spread on velvet. Naoki looked at the general's baton held out to him and did not reach for it.
I don't want rank. I don't want land.
The chamber froze. No one had ever refused the Emperor's generosity.
I defended the tower because it was my duty, not for reward.
A long silence. Then Naoki spoke the only request he had left.
Send me back to the same tower. This time with soldiers, so no one is abandoned again.
The Emperor studied the exhausted soldier before him. Then, with a wave, granted his wish.
I am going home.
The hero who could have commanded armies chose the watchtower that had almost killed him, because that was where he truly belonged. Before leaving the capital, Naoki took his reward and gave it all away. Pouches of gold left on the doorsteps of soldiers' widows. He never spoke his name. He only left the money and walked on. A child found a pouch and ran inside. The mother clutched it, not knowing whose hands had saved her. At the edge of the old cemetery, he found them, 2 small stones, the names Yuki and Mia, barely legible.
I stopped them. I made sure it will never happen again.
He knelt and placed his battered spear between the graves. A soldier's mark.
Naoki-san, I heard you are reforming the tower garrison. Let me come with you.
Naoki looked up, and after a long silence, he nodded. They rode out of the capital together, the dust of the road rising behind them. For the first time since the siege, Naoki felt the ghost in his chest begin to quiet. The rebuilt tower rose against the sky, and at its base, a new garrison stood at attention. The young soldiers saluted, their eyes wide. The hero of the 100 Days had returned to them. Naoki did not give grand speeches. He simply began to train them. Endless drills, positioning, the art of holding a narrow space.
A beacon is not just fire. It's a promise to every soldier on the wall that someone is watching.
Scout Taro trained beside them. No longer a messenger, but a soldier among soldiers. At night, Naoki walked the rampart alone. The plain below was quiet, and the stars above were clear. He traced the old carvings on the stone, his own desperate message, and felt no bitterness, only a quiet certainty. The tower was no longer a punishment. It was a purpose, and for the first time in over 100 days, Naoki allowed himself something that had been a stranger, a real unguarded smile. The 100 days were over, but his watch had just begun.
Naoki, do you ever regret it, holding out alone for all those days?
Naoki was silent for a long moment. The wind stirred the old scars on his arms.
Every day was a choice. I could have died, but I chose to stand.
He led Taro inside, to the wall where the tally marks covered the stone like a chronicle.
These marks, they're not just days. They're proof that I refused to break.
They should be preserved, as a monument so no one forgets.
Naoki traced the deepest line, the one he carved on day 60, when he wrote his desperate message.
The tower will always remember, and so will I.
They stepped back outside, the plain melting into twilight. The sun sank behind the tower, and the guard changed quietly. 100 days had taught him that peace was not the absence of battle, but the choice to stand watch over it. The seasons turned over the watchtower, but the beacon never went dark. The garrison grew, and Naoki remained in the capital. They carved his likeness in stone, a lone soldier, spear planted, forever facing the border. Songs were sung. The ballad of the 100 Days became a soldier's anthem, but Naoki never heard them. He was on the rampart, watching the same horizon. Young recruits came and went. He trained them all. He trained them all. Each learned the meaning of a beacon. The tally marks were sealed behind glass, preserved in the tower's stone, a monument to 100 nights of defiance. In the quiet hours, he stood among the graves of fallen comrades and spoke their names, a private ritual. He grew older, but the faint smile never left his lips. His eyes held the same steel from day 100, and every night, without fail, the beacon blazed across the plain. A promise kept. 100 days had defined him, but a lifetime of vigilance was his answer. His face was older now, carved by years under the sun, but the eyes held the same steel they carried on. Day 100. The wind stirred his graying hair, a familiar friend that had never abandoned him. He was never the Empire's greatest hero. He was its most stubborn soldier, and that was enough. The tower stood at dawn, no longer a lonely outpost, but a sentinel of peace. A single spear planted in the ground marked where 100 days were won. No monument could say more. Naoki kept his watch, as he always would, and the beacon burned on.